Hello everybody, how are you this morning? Thank you for asking me along here. Thank you as well to Ravenpack for organising this symposium. Absolutely fantastic. My name is Graham, as you heard. I've been working in the field of cybercrime. Well, not the field of cybercrime, I'm one of the good guys. I've been working for the computer security industry for around about the last 30 years. I started off by writing antivirus software. In fact, I was hired to write one of the very first antivirus programs for Windows 3.0, if you can think back that far. I was working then for a company called Dr. Solomon's. Some of you may remember Dr. Solomon's antivirus toolkit before it got consumed by McAfee. I got given that job even though I'd never written a Windows program, actually. And I asked Alan Solomon, I said, how come you're asking me to write this? He said, doesn't matter you haven't written a Windows program before. He said, no one's going to buy it. Everyone is going to buy the OS 2 version. Just gives you an idea of how the world has changed, because he thought the future for technology and computers, Microsoft wasn't going to figure, and Windows wouldn't matter. OS 2, he thought, it was a bit like Betamax versus VHS. Not necessarily the right one in the end. Anyway, today I'm not writing antivirus software. I'm talking about computer security threats and some of the risks which organizations face. So I give talks like this, I write, I blog, I podcast. There's the name of my podcast. You don't have to listen to my podcast, but you should listen to podcasts. I'd really recommend it while you're commuting and things like that, because you can learn so many things about so many amazing subjects. And so I'm a big fan of podcasts. Anyway, the reason why you're all brought here is because of my rather clickbaity title of How to Make $1 Billion Through Cybercrime. And you're thinking, yes, I want to make $1 billion. Well, let's work out how to do it. You see, there are different ways to make a fortune through cybercrime. And the way traditionally most of the bad guys do it, in a typical data breach, for instance, is hackers will break into a company's server and they will steal information from that company. Maybe they haven't had secure passwords in place, maybe they've got a vulnerability on their server, but the thing is they're trying to steal information. Email addresses, names, passwords, which may well be unencrypted, all of that data has a value which can be exploited. And of course, one of the most precious things which people are worried about losing is credit card information. And so partial credit card data at the very least might be stolen by the criminals, who then can go and sell that on underground cybercrime forums. And that's a nice little business if you want to do that kind of thing. Obviously contains some risks, but I think you are thinking far too small. Yeah, that can get you a living. You can probably make a great deal of money out of that. But wouldn't you like to go a bit bigger? And some cybercrime gangs do go bigger. Let me introduce to you a hacking gang called Fin4. And I apologize for the poor names of these hacking gangs. Typically, they've been given these names by cybercrime researchers rather than by the people who write blockbuster novels, and so they haven't always put the right marketing in place. The Fin4 hacking gang decided, well, we're going to target big businesses. Oops, did I click twice? Or? There we are. We're going to target big businesses because obviously they've got quite a lot of data, and specifically, we are going to target Wall Street. We're going to target organizations who are maybe publicly traded. And what do they want from these big publicly traded businesses? Well, they're after insider information. The information which isn't public, the information which hasn't been released, information which potentially has a great deal of value. And the kind of information which they're after, the kind of data, is known as black edge data. This is market catalyst information. I love that. Isn't that? Oh, it sounds very sexy, doesn't it? Market catalyst information which can be used for a trading advantage. So it might be news about mergers and acquisitions. It might be news about financial results. It might be news about new products as well, which are coming out. And so in order to get that information, the hackers target particular people at your company. People such as these: C-level executives, the legal folks, the regulators, the risk and compliance personnel, the people who might be regularly discussing market-moving information inside your organization, which you're not broadcast into the world, that you're not putting on the side of the building. They've got specialist information. And how do the criminals know who to target inside your organization to get this kind of data? Well, they have a tool at their disposal. You see, there is an underground, top-secret criminal forum where the bad guys have been collecting information about your organization for years. Information about who works inside your company and their roles, and they've been collecting this database, and it's been honed over time to make it very, very valuable. Chances are, most of your organizations here are... I said it was top secret and underground, didn't I? I meant LinkedIn. And this is where the criminals go if they want to know who works at specific places inside your organization. It is a gold mine of data. And everyone is willingly putting their information up there. Where they went to college, but not just that, who they know inside the industry, where they work. So if you wanted to target the chief financial officer at a particular organization, or maybe the HR department, which many criminals want to target as well, you know who to target. And it's not hard, even if you haven't connected with the person, to work out how to send them an email address. So send them an email, because chances are their mailing address is name.lastname@company.com. or its first initial surname @company.com. It's not tricky at all to do this kind of thing. And you can set up very targeted attacks. So one thing, for instance, which I did was I was interested in finding out some company secrets and how easy it might be to do that. And I thought, you know what, I'm not going to target the chief executive officer. I'm not going to target the chief finance officer or the HR department. I'm going to target the people who actually really know what is going on inside the company, which is normally the personal assistant. Personal assistant knows everything. They know all the stuff that the CEO never hears about. They hear all the gossip, the things which everyone's too afraid to tell the boss. The personal assistant finds out about, because people don't mind speaking to them. And so, for instance, I did a search. And I said, I'm only interested in London, and I'm interested in targeting PAs to the CEO. And I got hundreds and hundreds, almost 1,000 results there. People who I could then have targeted maybe with a carefully crafted email, maybe with a malicious attachment installing malware, which could have opened up a backdoor on their computer, which would have allowed me to read every email which they receive, every communication they make, could have spied on their screen, could even have taken over their computer and watched them through their webcam or listened through their microphone to private conversations. Very easy to target people in this fashion. And we're all allowing our organizations and our staff to regularly update this database. It's astonishing that we do this, isn't it? It reminds me rather of, there was this poll once as to who were the greatest hackers in history. You know, who were the ones who managed to steal the most information? Who were the greatest social engineers ever? And you had the normal sort of catalogue of the criminals and the bad guys and the people who hacked TK Maxx and things like that. But there, right at the top, the number one name was Mark Zuckerberg. Because Mark Zuckerberg, although he's not been sent to prison or anything like that, and no one's suggesting that he's done anything criminal as far as I know, what he managed to do is he managed to convince us to give all of our data for free and willingly, and to keep it up to date. So, you know, that would be an absolute godsend, friend, wouldn't it, for any criminal, that he managed to do that. Quite astonishing. So, back to the Fin4 hacking gang. They've targeted people inside your organization, maybe the C-level executives. So what are they going to do now they have that email address? Well, they sent emails like this. Here's an example. This is an email which was sent during this particular attack by this hacking gang, and we'll zoom in and have a closer look at it. It claims to have come from a company, so they've either hijacked an email address at a public company or they've forged the email address. Unfortunately, it's very, very easy to fake emails. Email was invented in the days of the Open University. It was, you know, sort of people wearing socks and sandals and enormous beards were on the internet. They never imagined that the great unwashed public would ever be allowed onto the internet. It was just purely academics, really, who were using it. And as a consequence, they didn't build security into email. And so I could send you an email claiming to be Theresa May or Kermit the Frog or Bill Clinton or whatever I liked. And for most people, it would fool them into thinking it really was from them. So email typically is not encrypted. Typically, there's no verification as to who has really sent the message. So here, you've got an email which claims to have come from a big company, and the subject line is someone, an employee at your company, is online making negative comments about your organization. And it carries on. It says, I noticed that a user called FinanceBull82, claims to be an employee, is in an investment discussion forum. He's posting negative comments about your company, mostly about how much your executives are getting paid. And you specifically, they're saying you're overpaid, probably overweight, and incompetent. Anything which drives you, go, oh, how could they say such a thing? Giving detailed instances of bad stuff going on. They may have unwittingly divulged some confidential information, and you at this point are thinking, well, this is very good of them to tell me about this. They're saying that they are a long-time client. We don't think this is very good. You need to sort this out. I very helpfully included a link to the forum where this discussion is going on. Go and check it out and sort it out. And who, honestly, wouldn't be tempted to click on that link? I think many people would. They'd be outraged, either because it's mentioning them specifically or it's slagging off the bosses. You might even click on it because you think this is going to be hilarious. You know, they're slagging off the bosses. Let's see what they're saying online. And boom, you click on the link. And as a consequence, of course, something bad's going to happen. This isn't the real link, obviously. I've sanitized it for this purpose, but this is the actual email, or one of the emails, which this hacking gang was sending. And when you click on the link, what happens is a dialog box pops up on your computer telling you that you need to re-log into your email. And it looks like the regular kind of thing. It's just asking for your username and password, and so you type it in. Because in that moment, you are a caveman. You're not really thinking like a sophisticated computer user. You just really want to see this juicy thing, or you're outraged, you're seeing red mist, and you can't stop yourself. It's like that sort of, you know, you get that sort of, that feeling in your finger. It's like the mouse, I know I mustn't click, but I will click. I mustn't click. Jennifer Lopez naked. Yes, I will click. No, I won't. Yeah, I'll go on. And before you know it, you've got a big problem. Who wouldn't click? Sometimes they send other types of lure. So they might actually, one of the things which we saw this hacking gang do is once they'd hacked some email addresses and once they'd observed for a while, they got hold of some confidential information from businesses. And then they would send it to someone else in the business saying, hey, I've just come across this. Can you check this out? And they'd say, here's a top secret document. But what they wouldn't say is that they had booby-trapped the document. So the document, again, would pop up a message which would ask for usernames and passwords. That's what this gang was all about. They were all after usernames and passwords. Other times, they would send other genuine pieces of literature which they'd just scooped up off the net, things which they thought you might find completely benign and imagine this is safe. And when you click on them, again, you encourage people to click. Maybe it's a PDF, maybe it's a Word document, and when you click, up pops some kind of pop-up. In this case, it claimed to be a Windows, a sort of login to your computer, and they even customized it so they would put the logo of your particular organization in there as well. So this was a targeted attack against specific organizations, so you would be less likely to find it suspicious. And the consequence of all this is they've now got your passwords. And once they've got your password, they are effectively a fly on the wall. You don't know they're there, but they can see everything that's going on in the room. They can read all of your communications, and they can just wait. And with this particular gang, it wasn't just one fly, and it wasn't just your firm that's been hacked, but a number of other organizations as well who you're communicating with, your consultants, your law firms, your advisory firms, other people who are discussing potentially market-moving information, maybe an upcoming merger or acquisition, maybe some good news, maybe some bad news, financial results. But this is something which this gang wanted. They were after this black edge data. Market catalyst information was valuable to them. Now, when an attack like this happens, sometimes someone will get a bit savvy. Sometimes someone will say, oh, I think something a bit odd's going on my computer, and they'll go to IT and say, is this message legitimate? I'm not sure if it was or not. And maybe the IT department will send a warning to the rest of the company, say, well, look, we're aware that this is going on. Can you please keep your eyes open if you receive any similar phishing messages? Well, the Fin4 hacking gang, they thought about that, and so they devised a way to make it more difficult to spread those kind of warnings. What they would do is, on hacked computers, which they now had access to, they would set up a rule inside your email client, so if a message ever arrived saying virus or malware or phishing or hack or something like that, the kind of message which your IT department would put in the subject line, that message would go straight into the bin. You'd never realize it was there. It was immediately and automatically deleted. And so users never got the warnings. So just fairly simple technique being used by the hackers here to cover their tracks. A lot of what goes on today in terms of hacking of organizations is not actually that sophisticated. We do hear incredible stories of state-sponsored hacking and vulnerabilities and zero-day exploits and things like this. Quite often, however, the hack is fairly rudimentary, like asking people for their password, tricking them into entering it. And if that works, then that's going to be good enough in order to get the data they want. So Fin4, the hacking gang, now have access to people's email inboxes. They've got access, they can see the communications, and they're lying in wait. They're looking in the background. They're hanging around for months and months, gathering data and more information about your organization. They don't want to play their card too soon. But then the gang had an idea, an amazing idea. Because up until now, they'd been hacking a handful of businesses, which was working quite well. But what if they could hack 100 businesses all at once and still steal this information? What if there was some place they could go where if they just hacked those computers, that would give them access to all of these companies' secrets? And it turns out there is a place where you can go to get company secrets, where companies are giving their secrets to before they are made public, and they are the newswires. So what companies do is they put out press releases to Business Wire, PR Newswire, and they say, we'd like this to go out tomorrow at 2 p.m., announcing our new financial results or our acquisition of XYZ Incorporated, or we've got a new CEO, whatever the news is, whether it be good or bad. But it's very important that everyone gets that news at the same time, so no one has an advantage. It's very important that no one inside the company uses that privileged information to do any insider trading, right? There's rules against that sort of thing. That would be unfair, wouldn't it? But if the hackers hacked these news wires, they get to see the press releases and the secrets and the financial results in advance. They've compromised the networks of these. So, how long were these news wires compromised by hackers? Well, the bad news, it was almost 12 months. 12 months of seeing all those secrets from companies. Those are the world's leading news wires. Actually, I'm only kidding. It wasn't 12 months at all. It was 5 years. 5 years the hackers were inside Business Wire and PR Newswire and other newswires seeing, so maybe I haven't emphasized that enough, let's do it. There you are, slightly bigger. They were stealing the secrets of these organizations and these companies and able to see this information. And with this information, these hackers were able to pass it on to crooked dealers. They passed these press releases, including quarterly financial results and all manner of other things, before they were made public to shady dealers and people who would do insider trading. And ultimately, they accessed something in the range of 100,000 press releases from over 100 companies. And just the hackers, this was just their share, they made over $30 million from doing that. Fairly rudimentary hack, but that's what they were able to make profit from their system. 5 years, the news wires of those companies were hacked, which is, of course, not a problem, because it's not that big a deal. It's only $30 million. Because we're still thinking far too small. We need to think much, much bigger than that if we want to make ourselves a decent fortune just by grabbing some passwords. I want to talk to you about another gang, a gang called, unimaginatively, Fin7, also sometimes called Carbonac. And what they realized, they actually went back in time in a way, and they looked at the people who used to rob banks, people like Willie Sutton, a famous bank robber back in the day in the United States. Infamously, he robbed dozens and dozens of banks. He had a 40-year career as a bank robber, real professional. He escaped from maximum security prisons on 3 occasions. One time, he managed to somehow secrete about his person a 45-foot-long ladder. I don't know how he quite managed that, in order to get over the perimeter wall of the prison. I'm not sure how a prisoner does that, but he somehow managed it. And there were frantic manhunts. He became something of a folk hero in the process. And the phrase which is, the question which is often raised with Willie Sutton, the famous phrase, I don't know if it's apocryphal or whether it's actually happened or not, but the phrase you always hear is, well, someone asked him, well, why do you keep on robbing banks? And he said, well, that's where the money is. That's the way you do it. You don't go and rob the haberdashery, right? It's not what you do it. And it's still true today, right? That's why people rob banks, because that's where the money is. And here, for instance, in Northern Ireland, just about a month ago, this was caught on CCTV. This is a rather sort of basic brute force attack coming in through the firewall with your digger. And these particular chaps are after an ATM. It's been stolen from a garage here. The digger was also stolen from a construction site. And they've struck around about 11 times in recent months, this particular gang. And astonishing, isn't it? There it goes. There is the ATM. They'll work out how to get into it later. So sometimes brute force attacks work. That's not what Fin7 did. What Fin7 did was they sent emails like this, claiming to be the SEC, the Securities Exchange Commission. And they sent out what looked like official documents, a Word document, a booby-trapped Word document. And of course, people click on a Word document. And when they clicked on the Word document, they were told, oh, this is a secure Word document. It is protected and encrypted. And you are going to have to enable editing. So there will be a message box which pops up from Microsoft Word asking you, are you really sure you want to allow this? And we are telling you right now, prove you're not a robot by pressing that button. And if you press that button, you circumvent Microsoft's built-in security measures, and it means that the Word document will now be capable of doing nasty stuff on your computer, in this case, opening an LNK file, which will infect you. So now these guys, the Fin7 guys, are using malware. And their intention is to infect a bank employee. They targeted banks specifically. His or her computer, is now infected with malware. The infiltration of the bank has begun. Once they've got that sort of base camp on that particular computer, they then spread out to other computers across the bank network. They're gathering information as they go about the topography of the network, and they're looking for computers which specifically are in control of the bank's infrastructure, particularly its ATM infrastructure. That's what they ultimately want to hack. And they will be there, they will be in place, these hackers, for on average between 2 and 4 months, from the original infection to the complete compromise of the infrastructure. They don't announce their presence. It's not like in the old days of computer viruses when letters dripped down the screen or a great big skull appears or it starts playing the Blue Danube and going, yoo-hoo, I've infected you. Those viruses did used to exist. They typically aren't as common anymore, other than in the case of ransomware. Most malware doesn't announce its presence. It doesn't work for the bad guys to announce that they're patient, they're happy to sit silently, and they are actually basically videoing everything which goes on your computer. This is just a still, but in fact there are videos online where you can see the activity going on inside, in this case, a Russian bank. And you can see that they were able to access people's email as well. And the intention, ultimately, as I said, is to infect the infrastructure, specifically the ATM infrastructure, because the Carbonac gang, also known as Fin7, they are interested in extracting money from the ATMs up and down the country. Not just in Russia, not just in Ukraine, but in many countries around the world. And they did it in three ways. We have money transfers, we have inflation of account balances, and finally we have specifically controlling the ATMs as well. Let's have a look at what they did in each of these cases. Money transfer. Well, for you or I to transfer money, we log into our bank account, we have to jump through various hoops, we enter the details of the bank account that we want it to go into, and if we've never transferred the money before, we're asked, are you sure? Are you really, really sure? In case it's some kind of scam. And, you know, it works fairly simply. What the criminals do is, because they've managed to infect the infrastructure and take it over, and they've got so much power, they are effectively the boss of the bank now, they are able to instruct the computer systems simply to move the money into accounts. And once money's been moved into an account, a money mule can take it out of that account and move it into another account or take it overseas. It can be hard to track and trace. It's a fairly simple kind of thing to do, but they're doing it from the inside, not from the outside, which means it tends not to get noticed quite so quickly. And then there's inflating account balances, and this is quite astonishing because once they've taken over the infrastructure, they have access basically to a huge database of everybody's bank account. And they know the balances of everybody's bank account. And just like any other database, that is a series of numbers which are constantly going up or down, you know, depending on the bank balance in individual accounts. And so a hacker, if he has control over a bank's infrastructure, can command the balance of a specific bank account to be increased. And then they can ring up their mate on the other side of the world and say, hey, if you go to this ATM and enter these details with the card we've given you, you'll find there's a whole load of money in it because we've just increased the balance on that particular account. Now, that's a bit of a faff to do that, because you've got to do it individually on each account which you want to increase. So what these hackers actually did, what the Carbonac gang actually did, was they ran a database query. And they said, what we're going to do is we're going to look for bank accounts with a very specific amount of money in them. And any account which has that specific amount of money in it, we're going to increase their balance. And so this is what they did. They said where the balance is 35 rubles, which is around about 54 cents, so you know, it's nothing, it's just pennies, less than a pound, increase it to 1 million rubles. And they were able to run that command across the entire database, which meant en masse they were able to increase people's balances. Now, the side effect of this, of course, was that there were some people who unexpectedly, and weren't connected with the crime whatsoever, just by chance they happened to have 35 rubles in their account, and suddenly they were rich, and they were loaded. But the hackers didn't care, so what if some people got a huge boost in their money? It's not like they were likely to report it to the bank if they only had 54 cents beforehand. So some people got a very pleasant surprise. And then hackers were able to go to each ATM, take out large amounts of money. When you do that on scale, you began to steal an awful lot. And there's control in specific ATMs as well. You can send a command to specific ATMs to tell them to spit out notes. They also reprogrammed ATMs as well. I don't know if you know how ATMs work. ATMs have a cassette or they have a few different cassettes of notes inside them. So they will have a cassette of £5 notes maybe, £10 notes, £20 notes, maybe £50 notes. And when you ask for a particular amount of money, it will take maybe 2 10s and a 50. And it says, here's your 70 quid, right? Well, what happens with some ATM hacking is they will reprogram the ATM to not know what denomination of money is in which cassette. And so they will tell it, the ATM that the one which contains the £20 notes actually contains £5 notes, or vice versa, yeah? And so when the person comes along and asks for £100 out of their account, instead of being given 5 20s, for instance, they might actually be given 5 50s. And so you get more money which comes out as a consequence. Does that make sense? So, and it shows on the computer systems in the database that that person only took out £100 rather than £250. It's one of the ways in which it's possible to get the money out. So they could control ATMs, and they could even send it a specific command, specific ATMs, which would say, if someone comes up to you and enters this particular PIN, then give them 15,000, or empty out the entire ATM. And the way in which the hackers found out how to do this with ATMs is, of course, that they got the manual for the ATM, which they downloaded off the internet. That's how they learned how to reprogram these things. And there's actually video footage as well of some of these hacks taking place. And of some of the guys who would collect the money. They just go up to it. Sometimes you'll see them on the phone because they're waiting for a specific PIN to be given to them. And when the PIN is given to them, they can just open up their little sports bag and fill it up with cash. And these guys had mules all around the world collecting money. They weren't making a vast amount of the money themselves, but they were then giving it to others. And people could be hired to do this from the other side of the world. It's a great deal of money which could be stolen. So once you've got all of this money, how are you going to spend it? And that, of course, is one of the problems with money, which is why typically the stolen money is laundered into a cryptocurrency such as Bitcoin or Ethereum, and then used to buy luxury cars and houses. Although that can be a challenge. I don't know if you've tried to buy a luxury car or house with Bitcoin. It's not necessarily always that easy. There are now Bitcoin mixing services as well. There are particular online services. One got hacked just the other day, so I wouldn't necessarily recommend using them, where they will try and muddy the waters regarding the contents of your wallet. But this was a real commercial enterprise, a commercial criminal enterprise. In fact, the bad guys set up a company. It's called Combi Security, or was called Combi Security. This is according to Europol. And the company was headquartered in Russia, Ukraine, and Israel. And they used this company to recruit developers. And they claimed to be a penetration tester. And they claimed to be white hat hackers who would help banks with their security. In fact, they listed, some of the banks which they actually hacked were listed as customers on their website. And they had something like 80 employees. And of course, they are now defunct because, good news, the bad guys were arrested. This is one of the leading members who was arrested in Spain by the authorities over there. He was arrested in March of this year. There have been a number of other guys who've been arrested as well. I suspect, however, that the vast majority of these guys have not yet been apprehended. We will have to wait and see what happens next. They ended up making, according to Europol, $1 billion through that scheme because they did it on scale. And they hacked so many large banks. So the future's looking quite rosy, isn't it, for these criminals? Provided they don't get caught, provided they cover their tracks well enough, maybe they're going to get away with it and make themselves a nice little fortune if you want to work in that area. I'm not so sure that I necessarily do. So what of the future? Well, I don't think we're going to see the cyber criminals going away. There's more and more information being put online, more and more information which we are trusting to online services or to our systems, and which has just made it accessible to the entire world. And human weaknesses, human mistakes, entering our passwords, choosing poor passwords, not using two-factor authentication, not using encrypted mail, not verifying that communications really are from who they claim to be, These sort of mistakes are mistakes which businesses and individuals are going to carry on making. And as Glenn said, Glenn gave a great talk earlier, and one of the real takeaways from that, I felt, was that you're never going to get 100% security. It's not possible to do that. And we shouldn't, in a way, it's great aim and everything, but you're always going to be disappointed if you're trying to do that. But what we can try to do is we can try and make ourselves more secure and make it harder for people to steal our information, whether they be law enforcement or intelligence agencies or common criminals. And make sure that we are people who are running away from the bear faster than the other people. So as long as you make yourself harder to hack than other organizations, I think you'll be in good stead for the future. And that's one of the main messages here, I think, is maybe even consider hacking yourself, hack your own company. With the approval of the IT team, hopefully, get everyone on board with that sort of idea of thinking, well, where are our weaknesses? What could be done? Get yourself into that mindset, because it's better to find out those problems yourself rather than waiting for the hackers to find out that your staff are susceptible to clicking on links or entering passwords, which ultimately might lose your organization hundreds of millions of dollars. Thank you very much indeed.
Aren't the hackers easily found by SEC, inside trading patterns, follow the money approach? Also, what capital do the hackers use to invest?
So you'd like to think so, wouldn't you? But the truth of the matter was that they were doing it for 5 odd years. Obviously, eventually, there were enough clues and suspicious trading that the SEC began to investigate and get the authorities in as well to look into this. But this was an organized operation which was going on for a long time and grabbing an awful lot of data. And of course, they had the assistance of crooked people who presumably had respectable jobs in Wall Street and other stock exchanges around the world who were doing this. So there are always bad apples out there. Sometimes it's just a mopping up operation. Regarding capital, which the hackers use to invest, it could be from past hacks. A lot of these hacking groups these days, these hacking criminal groups, are old-style criminal groups who've, they've gone .com. Rather than robbing banks in a Ford Cortina with a stocking over their head, they've now they've heard the word that it's much easier and safer to hack into accounts, maybe using computers instead. So they've hired their nephew. They've got him on board. He's good with computers, isn't he? Get him on board. He'll help them out. And so it is traditional organized criminals. So you will see, for instance, the Russian mafia who are heavily invested in this. And these are people who are making money through all manner of different dodgy ventures.
We'll take one more question. We have one over there. Susan, can you?
Yep. So how do hackers camouflage their IP addresses, VPNs, Tor?
Yes, well, Anonymous, well done for covering your tracks as well with that. You've answered it yourself. So they will use tools like VPNs. They will use hacked computers as well around the world. So if a computer appears to be connecting to you from Belgium, it's possible that that is a computer which is being controlled via South Africa from a computer on a Brazilian beach. So the hackers will often use a sort of proxy, a long list of different computers. Sometimes they will use legitimate VPN services. Be careful with that, however. Some VPN services are not as private as you may imagine. And Tor, of course, is a famous tool which can be used for covering your tracks too. But it's just as we have human weaknesses, so do the criminals as well. And they often will make dumb mistakes. The number of times it just took one occasion when the hacker posted a message on a forum and he forgot to turn his VPN on, or he was logged into the wrong account. The kind of mistakes we can all imagine ourselves making. The number of times that has happened, and that has ultimately led to the entire criminal operation becoming undone, is very, very common. So, thankfully, these guys are human just as much as we are.
This is Raven Pack.